Are the judges ready? Is the timer ready? Good morning. My name is Andrew Alexander, and I stand for the resolution, slavery was a just cause for the American Civil War. Definitions. The slavery issue was a justified reason for the American Civil War. Slavery, the owning of slaves as a practice. Issue, a point under dispute. Justified, to show justness and rightness. Reason, able to be fair. American, of the U.S. country. Civil War, war between different factions of the same nation. All under Webster's dictionary. The value today are African American lives during the slave times. Contention number 1. African Americans weren't given their proper rights that they deserved. Archaeological discoveries show that enslaved people were more than merely property for their masters. The standard rations enslaved people received were cornmeal and salted fish, which they harvested themselves in their limited personal time. Enslaved people kept gardens, raised poultry, and foraged. And the standard slave quarter on Mount Vernon's 5 farms was a rough, one-bedroom lodge structure with a wooden chimney. On Manson's house farm, many enslaved house servants and craftsmen lived in large barrack-style quarters. Contention number 2. People are affected now through racism. Living descendants are helping reshape the interpretation of slavery. Stories of enslaved individuals live on through their descendants, and we live now with the legacies of slavery every single day. Contention number 3. Families were not together. Families were often separated by miles. Field workers could be assigned to any of the 5 farms without regards to their wives, husbands, or children. So efforts had to be made to share whatever free time they could with loved ones. At Mount Vernon, many families were separated across different farms due to their work assignments. Enslaved workers at all sorts of jobs throughout the slaveholding South, but the majority were field hands on relatively large plantations. Men, women, and child served as a field hand. The owner decided when slave children would go into the fields, usually between the age of 10 and 12. Slave families lived in crowded cabins called quarters. The lives of black people under slavery in the South were controlled by a web of customs, rules, laws known as slave codes. Slaves could not travel without written pass, and they were not permitted to be a moment's idle until it was too dark to see. Slavery in the South was horrific, and is an amazing and just reason for the American Civil War. Thank you. I am now ready for cross-examination. Are the judges ready? Timer. Good morning. My name is Andrew Alexander, and I stand against the resolution, slavery was a justified reason for the American Civil War. Definitions. I already stated my definitions. My value. Value today is hard work. Criterion. The slaves were not treated as bad as it may seem. Contention number 1. Without slavery, America would have no food or cotton and would be destitute. At its height, slavery was a $3 billion plus industry and a major engine of the United States economy. England's South colonies in Northern America developed a farm economy that could not survive without slave labor. And of all the crops grown in the South before the Civil War, including sugar, rice, grain, corn, and cotton, was a chief moneymaker. Millions of acres had been turned to cotton productions following the invention of the cotton gin in 1793. As more and more cotton lands came under cultivation, especially in Mississippi and Texas, the demand for slaves boomed. By 1860, a mature male slave would cost between $1,000 and $2,000. A mature female would sell for a few $100s less, lending the slaves. Contention number 2. Slaves were actually safe through the Constitution. The Constitution rooted in freedom and liberty that actually protected the slaves. The plantation owners controlled the farm and saw that it earned money. He supervised, fed, and clothed the people living on the property for free. In 1850, a Southern slave owner might have said something like this: "Our slaves are like children who need to be cared for and disciplined. They're content and are actually better off than free white laborers working in northern factories." Contention number 3. Slaves would have been in poverty without work. They would have been in poverty without their work. Many slaves lived on large farms called plantations. These plantations produced important crops traded by the colony, crops such as cotton and tobacco. Each plantation was like a small village owned by one family. That family lived in a large house, usually facing a river. Many separate buildings were needed on a plantation. For example, a building was needed for cooking, and builders were needed for workers to produce goods, such as furniture that we may use on the plantation. The business of the plantation was farming, so there also were barns for animals and buildings for storing the drying crops. There was a house to smoke meat so it could be kept safely, and there was a place on the river which goods were sent by ship to England. And of all the crops grown in the South before the Civil War, including sugar, grain, and rice, and cotton, there were billions of acres that had to be turned into cotton productions. And so without these slaves to help out around the fields and produce these crops, they would have had to be in a factory up north. And so they were clothed, fed, and giving shelter for free. But all they had to do was work and be obedient to their masters. In conclusion, I urge the judges to reject the resolution slavery was a justified reason for the American Civil War. I am now ready for cross-examination.